The chat isn't recorded, so feel free to use the chat to ask questions or anything like that. But hopefully, if anyone is unable to get to these trainings, they can still watch the recording. So let's get started. I'll let this last person in. All right, well, again, welcome everyone to the final, the third and final lobby week training. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat to me, but as many of you probably noticed, we do have the chat disabled today. So you are only able to message either myself, Leah, or Pete. So that is to make it easier for folks who are using screen readers. Feel free to message Leah if you have any questions related to tech. What you can do is just private message her. You can also private message me if you have any questions related to content. All right, so let's get started. First, we're going to go over some Zoom norms. Most of you are Zoom experts by now, but there are a couple things that I want to go over. We're going to talk about the political framing of this moment, what we're asking for, what's at stake. We're going to talk about what to expect during lobby week. Many of you have probably attended a lobby week at one point. So this one is going to be a little bit different than kind of traditional in-person lobby weeks. We're going to talk about why sharing your story is important and how people will be able to do that. We're going to talk about making the ask, which is we would like you to vote for our contract. And then we're going to do a short role play of what a legislative conversation looks like. And then we're going to close and talk about some next steps. I will encourage you all to pop your questions in the chat. And then at the end and at a few kind of choice points, I will open it up for questions. And you can either raise your hand, go off mute, or put them in the chat. All righty. So again, all of you all are Zoom experts, but it is really important that we go over some expectations for this meeting. I will again remind everyone that this training is being recorded. If you would like to keep your video off and your sound off so you are not recorded, totally fine for me. Feel free to communicate with us in the chat. As I say at the top bullet point, use the chat for questions. We only have an hour, so it's a lot easier for me to just kind of read through them and pull out the ones that I can answer. And then at the end, I'll be sticking around for about 20 minutes if need be to answer any more complicated questions. Please change your name by right-clicking on your face box. Include your name, your local number, and your Senate district number if you know it. Please stay muted. It just makes the meeting move quicker if we don't have a lot of background noise. If I do see that someone's unmuted and making some noise, I'll mute them. It's not personal, we just got to keep moving. I would encourage folks to keep their video on if they're comfortable. As a facilitator, it's really hard for me sometimes to see if the training I'm training on is landing. So if you are going to use reactions, emojis, or keep your video on so we can see your face, that is a really good way for me to kind of tell that what we're doing is still landing. Finally, the last two things are direct message the Zoom support lead. That's Leah. So Leah, can you do me a favor and make a, yeah, perfect. So Leah's the person you should message if you run into any tech issues. Feel free also to message Pete if you have any questions. Pete, can you do something on your screen for me? There you go. Awesome, awesome. All right, well, let's get started. So I wanted to talk first about, what is at stake. Right now we have a, what is it? It's a $9.3 billion surplus. Is that right, Leah? Awesome. We have $9.3 billion that can be used in a variety of ways. And it is really important that that funding and that money goes to places that benefit our communities. We're talking infrastructure projects on our college campuses. We're talking programs for the state of Minnesota and a variety of other really cool things, including frontline worker pay, which is a bill that MAPE has been advocating for and will encourage legislators to vote for as well. But particularly for this lobby week, we are asking that our legislators vote to pass our contract. Many of us know that MAPE and MAPE elected negotiators worked really hard to get a contract that is dignified and meets the needs of our members. Now, do we deserve all of it because our members worked Minnesota through a pandemic and continue to do so? Yes. And I think we can definitely keep advocating for better and better contracts, and we can start by getting this one fully ratified. So the contract has already passed the SDR, but it still needs to pass the Senate and the House floor to be fully in place. If it does not pass the Senate or the House floor, we revert back to the old contract, which means we can lose things like the language differential, the COLA raises, and Juneteenth as an extra holiday. So it is very important that our contract gets passed. I also want to talk about, what is power in this moment? So oftentimes we're trained to think about power as like positive relationships with legislators. But for this context, and in my opinion, most political contexts, power is the ability to get something done or make something happen. So when we're talking about legislators, what we're asking them is to give us a yes or a no, or very specific questions or concerns they have about passing our contract. So in this moment, power is building a relationship with legislators where they're held accountable to us as voters, as constituents, and as state workers. And also it looks like getting, building a working relationship so we can get an answer and a commitment that we can rely on. So we're going to talk a little bit about what to expect between now and the end of next week. So right now, this week, you are in the lobby training. Congratulations, you made it here. We're very proud of you. Thank you for joining us. You will also receive either earlier today or a little bit later today, an email from the MAPE action inbox, which with each Senate team, you'll get an email with information about your day, the time, and the prep materials. So you should be receiving that email if you haven't already, and it should include all of the people in your Senate team. So say, for example, that Leah, Pete, and I were all in the same Senate district, we would be all on that same email. So you can use those emails to engage your teammates, or you can just use it as a way to kind of make sure you have all your materials and your ducks in a row. So the day of, we are going to start off the day with a pre-meeting with your Senate team, which will happen before the Senate meeting. You may already have a lead that's volunteered to run this meeting, but if not, that can be decided in the meeting or in this prep meeting. And then you can either lead a whole Senate district or specifically your House district. So say, for example, we're talking about Senate District 14, which is Senator Putnam, Representative Wolgamott, and Representative Tice. And we have a lead that is only in Representative Wolgamott's district, which is House District 14B. If there is someone from 14A who would like to lead the meeting with Representative Tice, you are able to do that. And during this meeting, you will also be able to walk through some documents that we have. Those are included in that email from the MAPE action inbox about what the structure of the meeting and kind of the roles that members can fill. So once that meeting is done, you will be able to have a meeting with your legislator. So there are 3 types of meetings folks can have. There is the Senate district meeting, the House A, and House B. We would love everyone to go to the Senate meeting. If you are in a House district that is not the meeting that is coming up, so say you're in House District 14B and the 14A one is coming up, you don't have to attend, but it would be really cool. It's always a great opportunity to support your coworkers and support your community members. And then after your meeting with a legislator, we have the debrief meeting. We will have a Teams form that will help you as a member track the conversation and kind of reflect on how the conversation went. And then also help us get kind of a whip count or an analysis from members. And this will also be a good time to talk about signing up for election shifts. I may be, a big political nerd, but I think meetings with legislators are some of the most agitational meetings. And being disappointed by how your legislator shows up or excited by how your legislator showed up is oftentimes a really good catalyst for signing up to knock doors, text bank your coworkers, or give people a call to talk about the election. All right, so I'm going to talk about the flow of the day, but I'm going to real quick count to 10 in my head. So if you have any questions, feel free to either raise your hand or put them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. All right, I've counted to 10 in my head. So the first thing that you are going to do on your lobby day specifically is go to the pre-meet. So everyone will be using the same Zoom link. It should come from MAPE, and it will be in that Wednesday email that you should receive. Once you are in the kind of main room, you will select your Senate district breakout room. If you aren't able to do that, someone will be there to help you get in there. Once you are in your breakout room, please update your Zoom name by right-clicking on your face to include your full name and your agency. And then you will be able to walk through the form provided to guide the pre-meet and the conversation with your legislator. This already should be in your inbox, and if not, it will be in your inbox at the end of the day. So there is a very good question in the chat from Darcy. So lobby day is the whole day, not just the meeting with the rep. So traditionally, lobby day was, everyone kind of descended on the Capitol. We had a really big rally. Everyone was given like a folder with information and then kind of sent on their way to find their legislator. Because we are doing things virtually, lobby week is actually going to be a full week, and you will join based on when your meetings are. So say you're meeting with Senate District 14 Senator Putnam is at like 1:30, and your House District meeting is at 2:30, and the other House District meeting is at 2. That is kind of the time that you will be in your kind of lobby week time. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm seeing a few head nods. Awesome, great, glad that made sense, Darcy. So I will also touch on, because this week is virtual, there are kind of two types of links that you might be receiving. So if the legislator will be using our link, they will join our meeting. So all you have to do is get into your prep breakout meeting, and you are good to go, and you can hang out there for your meetings. If the legislator is using their own link, you will join the pre-meet Zoom link and then join the legislator link. This is important because both of these links, if there are two, will be in that prep email you will be receiving. So keep an eye out for that. And then again, I'm just going to reiterate, those links will be in the Wednesday email. So if you have questions, feel free to look for that. And then you can also reach out to either myself, Leah, or Pete, or whoever your organizer is. And then, so I see a question from Mike in the chat. It's a really good one. So did I hear you right that one of us will need to volunteer as a leader for the conversation? I assume that means no MAPE staff support within individual meetings. That is a really great question. So if you and your crew feel like you would like a MAPE staff person in there, like an OBA or an organizer or something, you are welcome to ask. We may not have enough staff to cover every meeting, because we might have upwards of what, like 100 meetings now? Is that right, Leah? Yeah, so we may not be able to cover every meeting. The meetings that I would say will be prioritized to having a staff member in there are the meetings where there's only 1 or 2 members and they may need some support. But that is actually a really good segue into this next part, where there are a couple different roles that someone can fill. So the leader is often called the facilitator. This is the person that introduces the group. They ensure that the meeting stays on track and that critical questions are asked. When we mean leader or facilitator, we're not necessarily looking for like the perfect leader who says the right thing and does all the right things. What we really are looking for is someone who can keep a meeting on track and make sure that people have an opportunity to tell their stories, and most importantly, ask that the legislator supports our contract. So the other roles include a storyteller. This is someone who tells an intentional, well thought out personal story. This can be done in about 2 to 4 minutes. Pete is actually going to be modeling that for us today. And then we'll be able to show you kind of how that looks both in this lobby meeting context, but we'll also have a document sent out in the email today that will allow you to kind of put your thoughts together. We also have the question asker. This is another really important role. This is the person that redirects the conversation back to the topic and the personal stories as necessary. And they are most importantly responsible for making the final ask. And then finally, we have our note taker. I'm going to encourage all of you to be note takers, but we really do need to have one person we know is taking notes. The note taker takes notes on what's happening. For example, the stance the legislator has, some of the key things brought up by the legislator, questions, things like that. This is really important because it helps us, start to think about and shape the way we are engaging with these legislators. So our political counsel and our organizing council can often take this information and help use it to shape upcoming campaigns. So even if the notes don't seem necessarily super helpful, sorry about that, guys, they are helpful in the long run of shaping how we work with legislators in the future. All right, so when the meeting starts, your legislator has joined your meeting or you have joined theirs. The facilitator is the person who welcomes the meeting and they introduce folks in the meeting. So they can start off by saying, thank you for being willing to meet with us today. We're here to talk about the important work we do as state employees and seek your support For our contract, first, we would like to go around and introduce ourselves. And in this moment, I would love for you to name your name, the agency you work for, your job, and any leadership roles in MAPE. This is really important because, as you'll probably guess from, all the stuff I'll tell you today, it's important that our legislators put faces to names and faces to agencies and jobs that are done in the state of Minnesota. So after the facilitator kind of welcomes everyone in and people get an opportunity to share a little bit about themselves, they will again thank them for taking the time and reiterate that each one of us helps make Minnesota work. But to keep things brief, we have 2 members who will be sharing a few thoughts. And then the facilitator or leader will pass it to the first storyteller. So the kind of first thing that I want you to start thinking about is your story really does matter. As much as we as human beings and probably our legislators like to think we make rational decisions based on numbers and facts and data, most of us make decisions based on our emotional centers here in our brain and in our heart. So the things that we remember are the stories that people bring with them. So who is impacted by a good contract? It's our families, right? It's our children, it's our family members who are on our health care. It's all of these kind of little things that allow us to connect with each other as human beings. And that's why your story matters. So when you're sharing your story, we encourage people to keep it to about 2 to 4 minutes and talk about who are you, what work do you do for the state, and why it is important. Why is this contract specifically important, and why is your union important? And why is it important that your legislator specifically supports you as a voter and a state worker by voting for this contract? So Pete is going to model this for us, and I'm going to use the annotate button to kind of point out where he's at. But I'll also encourage you all to take a look at the document that was included in the email you received today. That'll help you kind of put your thoughts together, and it's basically these questions and some lines. So a nice little worksheet to help kind of put your thoughts together. So Pete, feel free to take it away, and I will mark where you are in your story.
Sounds good. Thanks, Britton. And as a quick disclaimer for everybody, Britton thought it would make more sense for me to not do myself, but rather to be a state worker. So I'm going to assume a particular state worker job. And if you are that job and I misstate what you do, give me a pass for training purposes. All right, ready? Go. Hello, Representative. Thanks again for meeting with us. My name is Pete Marincel. I'm a state employee and work as a project manager for Minute, partnering with DHS. I'm also a MAPE member, and I've been with the state and a member of MAPE for 8 years. And I also serve as a secretary in my local for MAPE. And what I do for the state is work with a team of other really highly skilled IT professionals working to modernize some of the systems that we use, that the public interacts with around services that DHS provides, particularly around Medicaid and programs related to Medicaid. And we're modernizing it so that people have a really good experience when they interact with the state of Minnesota. We serve hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans, and for efficiency's sake and people's lives, it's a really big deal that our systems are secure and efficient and well made, and that's what we do. And we work under a lot of pressure in terms of time and resources to make those systems work. So that's what I do, and the contract's really important to me. I actually came from the private sector where I made quite a bit more money, but the healthcare was not particularly good, and I had to get it myself. And I actually came to the state for more stability and to have good healthcare, and we bargained that healthcare, which I'm really proud of. And so that's why this contract's really important to me. It's a good contract. I'm proud of it, and it's also I think something that you can support, and I'm asking that you support it because we do really important work. And in order for us to do that really important work for Minnesotans, like I just talked about, we also need legislators that support us and our working conditions like our healthcare. Thank you.
Awesome. Everyone give a quiet round of applause for Pete. Thank you so much. So as you can kind of see, he was able to talk about what his work was, why it was important, why this contract's important, and why it's important that the legislator supports the contract. So your story doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the most compelling thing in the world, but it has to be yours. And that's why it's really important that we bring those to the legislators, because when they are voting on the floor, we want them to think about us. We want them to think about your faces. We want them to think about the work you do for the state. So once the storytellers are done, then we move into the section called the kind of two-way conversation based around the task. So this highlighted portion here, it reads, MAPE members step up for Minnesota every day. Will you step up and support our members by voting to pass our contract? This language is very important because oftentimes folks might shorthand it by saying, will you support workers or will you support MAPE members? But what's really important is that we need a yes, a no, or we need clarity on why we don't have a yes or a no on if they will be voting on the contract. Legislators are very skilled at communicating and dancing around questions they don't want to answer. So it's important that we have an opportunity to kind of engage them about if they will be voting for our contract or not. However, it is very important to remember that it's not our job to debate legislators because one, we're not going to win. It is their job. And it's our job in this moment to talk about why this contract matters to us and why supporting workers is important to you. And then it's also important for us to understand what a no, a yes, or a maybe is, because it will help us figure out how much support we have in the legislature for our contract. Real quick, I did get a note that someone's not able to see my screen. So could you just put a reaction if you can see that I'm on a PowerPoint slide that says the Ask Two-Way Conversation? Okay, it looks like most folks can see. I apologize, Lisa. I will make sure that you get the recording sent to you so that if you did miss anything, that you'll still have access to it. So feel free to just put your email in the chat and I will make sure to get that to you. So as I mentioned, it's really important to understand kind of some examples of how legislators will respond to us. Overwhelmingly, we expect legislators to support our contract, to vote on our contract, and for these meetings to be very positive and very comfortable. But it's important also that we kind of prepare you for what a no might look like and also prepare you for the moment to be able to kind of push back and say, we need a yes or a no, or we need some more clarity from you. So here are some examples that I came up with just based on my experience in working with legislators. The common one, most common you will see is, I will vote yes on the contract. Those are folks that we're very excited about. We're very excited to be building power. Some legislators might say, I support workers, but this is too costly and people should be able to advocate for their own wages. This person is indicating that they don't think the contract should be voted for because people should be able to individually advocate for themselves. Another example you might see, which is not necessarily related to our contract, is Governor Walz's spending is out of control. We should give money back to voters. While that is a political platform to have, it is not necessarily related to this contract, and it is important for us to kind of go back to the contract question. And then this is another common one you'll see. I have not read the contract specifics, but I plan to vote with my caucus. Or another option you may see is I've not read the contract specifics, but I have supported it in the past. In those situations, it's important for us to say, great, can we follow up with you on this date to see if you have additional questions for us, or if you have a more kind of solid opinion about how you're going to vote. All right, so we're going to practice. I'm actually going to have Pete play the constituent. So he's going to pretend to be a MAPE member again and share his story and make sure that he gets the ask. And then I am going to play a legislator who is probably going to vote no. So Pete is going to be able to kind of show what it looks like if you receive a no and how to respond to it. I want to be very clear that most legislators will say yes, or they will say a nice, I don't know, and maybe ask some questions. But we're going to be focusing on the no because those are kind of the harder conversations. So we want to make sure you're prepared for that. In my conversation, use the reactions button to tell me if you think my response is a yes, no, or a maybe. By the green check mark for yes, a red X for no, and the thumbs up reaction if you think that I need more information or that you all need more information to decide. All right, so Pete, I will have you take it away. I'll have you tell me what legislator I am by thanking me for giving you time, and then from there I'll kind of shape it.
Thanks. Thank you, Representative Drazkowski, for taking time to be with us and listening to our stories. So MAPE members step up for Minnesota every day. So we're asking, will you step up and support our members by voting to pass our contract?
Pete, thank you so much for having me come today. I'm always happy to talk to workers. As you know, I am a supporter of workers. I think it's really important that, when we're talking about workers' rights, that we are prioritizing workers who do not have unions and do not have third parties advocating for themselves, because I really think it's important that we focus on the average working person in Minnesota. And while, I'm happy you all have your union to advocate for you, I think it's more important that we put our resources and our votes in supporting the average worker and fighting to get more money back in their pockets. And, I really think unions limit the ability for people to do that.
So I appreciate your answer. I hear that you want to support workers in general, which I totally agree with. I don't think unions limit that, but I want to understand, are you saying that that you are planning to vote for our contract or not to vote, or to vote no on our contract? I guess I don't understand from your answer.
At this point, I plan on voting no. I think contracts like this, harm workers overall because they prioritize workers who have these third-party unions who can advocate for them, and they take money directly from the average worker. And I think it doesn't benefit us as state, workers. And I think we should prioritize, the average worker who doesn't have a third party advocating for them. So I plan on voting no.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear that, Representative. I appreciate you answering, but I just want to say that I hope that you reconsider that. We are both average workers. We are workers in Minnesota, and we bargain this contract for ourselves. That actually what it means to have a union. And you as a legislator, what we need from you is supporting us to do the work that we do that it supports Minnesotans. And so, as we mentioned, it's really important to us that we get your support so that we can do good work for Minnesota. It's disappointing to hear that you don't think that voting for the contract is important to that. I just want to assure you that it is, and I hope that you change your mind.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I don't think we will be able to ever see eye and eye on this, but I appreciate you taking the time to come meet with me. Yeah, so in scene, I am now Britain. I am not a ridiculous, obnoxious legislator. So there are a couple things in that are really important to note. So there were a couple moments where I utilized kind of very common anti-labor, anti-union arguments, making this point that MAPE is a third party, which is not true. And Pete did a really good job of not necessarily arguing with me on that point, but kind of saying, from my perspective and in my experience, this is my truth, right? And it is our truth that MAPE members negotiated for this contract, they voted for this contract, and they are ready to receive benefits of it. So I think, Pete, you did a really good job of not necessarily debating with me on what I was bringing to the table, but instead reiterating your point. So someone in the chat said, I thought we weren't supposed to debate with legislators, and you're totally right. So if I was going to say, we need to give more money back to people, and we're going to do that through tax cuts, and Pete said, well, tax cuts are not actually the most productive way. And then we went down this ridiculous rabbit hole about proof showing that tax cuts harm our economy versus more funding into social programs. That would be more of a debate, right? This kind of back and forth of proving each other wrong. But what Pete did was really good, because he wasn't arguing with me about whether I was right or not. What he was doing was he was offering up his own truth, which is MAPE members negotiated this contract, good for workers, and it's good for the state of Minnesota. And what he also did that I want to really highlight is he communicated to me that he was disappointed with the vote that I was going to take. Oftentimes we are told that people in power shouldn't kind of receive negative feedback from us. That is total BS in my opinion, and it doesn't serve us to say thank you for your time and move on. It really does serve us and help us to communicate to legislators when they are disappointing us, when they're letting us down as constituents. So yeah, don't get into a policy debate because you're not going to win it, but it is really important to continuously offer up our truth and our realities. So I hope that kind of clears that up. And then in the end of this conversation, when you're wrapping up, what's really important is to repeat back what was agreed upon. So if I said yes, and I was all for the contract getting passed, Pete could say, thank you for voting on our contract, and then maybe add something more like, we're excited to work with you, or hey, do you want to take a picture so we can celebrate that you're supporting state workers? If you have someone who either gave you a soft no, maybe they have some questions or you want to follow up to see if their vote has changed, you can say something like, thank you for listening to us. We will follow up on X date to see if we can answer any questions or learn more about your vote on our contract. This is important. So, say you have a legislator that they really care about Department of Transportation. So they care a lot about roads and road funding and things like that, but you didn't have a Department of Transportation person in that meeting. Now would be a good time to ask someone who is part of your local, in your Senate district, to write your legislator or set up a meeting with them to talk about how this contract helps Department of Transportation members. So there's a couple different ways you could kind of plan feedback. And it's really good for us to repeat that back to legislators, not only what they agreed to, but what we are agreeing to. Because at the end of the day, we really are partners with our legislators, and it's important that we act that way. And then finally, and one of the most fun things is if you want a picture, you can ask for it. You can either do that by taking a screenshot, or the legislator might take a picture themselves. You could ask them to send it to you, or you can just like Facebook stalk them a little bit. And most likely they put picture on their social medias. Once you find that, feel free to send it to someone in the comms team. I am a big fan of taking pictures because it does kind of two things. It shows that we're working together and that we have members who are active and caring about what's going on at the legislature. But it also has a very clear public accountability piece. If your legislator said they were going to vote for your contract and for some reason they don't, but you have a picture of it, we have the ability to hold them accountable and call them out for changing their voices. For their vote. Yes, I don't exactly know how to take a screenshot because it is specific to your computer, but what I will do is I will encourage folks to go onto Google and type in how to take a screenshot, and then most likely you will either find kind of like a keyboard shortcut or an application in most of your computers that will allow you to take a screenshot. When in doubt, ask whoever the millennial is on your team, and I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out. Ask the youngest person on your team. So the last and, in my opinion, most important parts of your legislative meetings are the debrief. These are important, again, because they help shape the conversations we're going to be having with legislators. In the future, they could help shape legislative plans, election campaign plans, all of these things. So it's really important for folks to talk through, what was your impression of this legislator? How did it feel to hear members tell their stories? What follow-up do we need to do? And then specifically, does everyone have what they need to follow up with the legislator with a thank you and their own story? So if you have the time to do this in your debrief, which I would encourage you to take the time to do, writing a quick thank you note and maybe adding in why the contract's important to you, even if you were the storyteller, again, is really important. We want our legislators to be thinking about us and about our members and about the work that our members do for the state of Minnesota when they're voting for the contract, and sending them a thank you message or sending along your story is a really great way to make sure that happens. All right, so I have some kind of quick tips that I like to give folks, but I know that I've been talking a lot and running through things, so I want to give folks an opportunity to ask any questions. So I'm going to count to 10 again in my head and keep an eye on the chat. And I will also keep an eye out for raised hands. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to ask. Yes, so Tammy said, I can see there's only one MAPE member in the other House district. Should I ask them if they'd like me to go with them? That is a great question, Tammy, and definitely do it. Sometimes that kind of camaraderie or solidarity can really make a meeting productive and helpful. Darcy asked a really good question. Are we debriefing as a group? Yes, so you're going to jump back into the pre-meeting Zoom link that you were in, or stay in there and debrief as a group. There will be a Teams form that we will ask folks, at least one person, to fill out so that we can track how these conversations went. And I saw two more good questions. Do we handle our meetings differently if we know we are meeting with MAPE-friendly people? Yes, it is still very important to take an opportunity to ask very specifically, will you vote our contract up, yes or no? But if you have someone who is always voted on our contracts, always happy to see us, you can also use this as an opportunity to identify, who of their colleagues might need some more support. So for example, is there a legislator who might vote on the contract but needs a few more pushes? Is there any questions they're hearing from their coworkers at the legislature about it? All that kind of stuff. So you could use it as a good kind of strategy section. Let's see. And then Rick posted, do we have any asks other than the contract? I know that when in AFSCME, we had several topics that other than the contract that we addressed. That is a really good question. So there should be a one-pager in your email that's talking about a few other things that we are advocating for at the legislature, including paid parental leave for everyone and frontline worker pay and a few other things that I'm failing to remember. That should be in the email, and if not, I would be happy to get that sent out to folks. Another really good question is, what if we are not available for one of the meetings? Attend the ones that work in your schedule. If you are not able to attend a certain one, feel free to just to let your team know, and they'll be able to kind of fill those gaps. And then Darcy asked what time. It wasn't in the email. So if the time that your meeting with your legislator was not included, you should double check with your organizer or with Leah. Leah, do you have another? Oh, I'm sorry, Darcy, it was about the debrief. Yes, the debrief should happen right after your legislative meeting. So if you have either a gap between the Senate and the House meetings, or you have time after all three, feel free to use that time for a debrief. All right. Oh, Amelia had a good question. How long should we anticipate talking with the representatives? Most legislators will have a hold on their calendar for about 15 minutes to 30 minutes, and most will try to get you out the door at the 15-minute mark. So that is kind of how that goes, which is why it's really important that we have people who are able to kind of redirect the conversation back to the topic, so that the legislator doesn't just like run out of time. Jerry had a good question of, is the vote scheduled? There is not a vote scheduled at this time because it depends on the legislative timelines and the vote timelines for the legislature, which is a really frustrating answer because it also kind of means that we are anticipating that the legislature will use our contract and other contracts as a bargaining. So I don't have a solid answer on when the vote is scheduled yet. And then I have one last question. When should we expect an email? I have not gotten one yet. So you should be receiving them by the end of the day. If you don't, feel free to contact Devin Bruce at MAPE.org. Leah put his email in the chat. You can also, I believe, follow up with whatever organizer recruited you for the event. All right, any last questions? I'm going to count to 10 in my head again, and then I'm going to jump over to the tips and tricks section.
Sorry, was that last question? Someone was wondering what to do if they hadn't gotten their email yet?
Yes, yeah. Do you have you probably have a better answer than I do.
Yeah, they're going out today, excuse me. So don't panic if you haven't gotten one yet. If you get to the end of the day and you haven't gotten one, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat, or you could always email action@mape.org.
Awesome. Alrighty, so I'm pulling the chat away from my screen so I can walk through the next slide, but again, feel free to keep putting questions there. And I'll be sticking around at the end of this training to answer any questions you might have. So a couple quick tips that if you took nothing from this training and you only take these 3 things, then I have done my job and it'll be perfect. So the most important thing for us to understand is that we cannot let our legislators get away without answering that question. Our electeds are elected to legislate. They are not elected just to talk and make us feel nice because we had a good conversation. They are elected to legislate. If they won't give you a yes or no, it is perfectly appropriate to ask for a yes or no answer, or ask what information they need to support the contract. That again is their job, to legislate and not just talk. Also, another really important thing to understand is that your voice is important and your experience as a public employee is important. We are often kind of taught and raised to believe that people in power, elected into power, have more intelligence, productivity, something that got them there that allows them to speak with more authority than you have. And I'm just going to name that as BS right now, because it doesn't serve us to believe that our legislators are smarter than us or have some sort of more authority than we do as state workers. So what's really important in these conversations is understanding that your voice, your story, and your experience is just as important as their elected office, and making sure that you are utilizing the space to share your voice and share your experience so that legislator knows that is deeply important. And also, you know, if your legislator sucks, you can start thinking about running for office or supporting someone who's better for office. So understanding how to utilize your voice to build power is deeply, deeply important. And then finally, take notes. Even if you are not the note taker, taking notes is really important because it can help us kind of collect information about how our legislators are acting, how they engage with unions and union members, and can also give us insight on how we should be working with them when it comes to future contracts and policy. So I have one last question that I want to highlight because I think it's relevant, and then I will let you all get on with your very fun Wednesdays. Lisa said, I have a small group. Should we all plan on doing a story? I would say if you all are comfortable sharing your stories, then yes. We can never have too many stories. And if we don't have enough time to get to a story, so say maybe a storyteller didn't have enough time to speak, then that is a really good opportunity for you to email them and again, thank them for their time and offer up your story as well. So that is what I got for this training. I do realize that it was a pretty long, kind of like 47 minutes of me just talking at you with a few interruptions from Pete. So I'm gonna take this moment to stop recording. So if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, you can feel free to go off mute, ask the question in the chat, or raise your hand and I will call on you.